What was that? Oh, there we went. Okay. That's what that was. Recording here.
Yeah.
So we
So,
will start rolling. I hadn't been recording up until now, so now we're recording.
but 7 o'clock was the intended.
7 o'clock was the intended time. So it has me worried. I think everybody got the email links that I sent out. I sent one yesterday and then one about 2 hours ago.
Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah,
hopefully those went out.
I
But
did
yeah,
get them.
yeah. See, that's one of the problems I think with remote and nice weather.
But
People just decide.
we'll take their donation regardless of
Well,
whether
then
they
that's
come.
the skin in the game approach.
Right.
Is that you got a skin in the game. The hope is that you will be there. But
But if they're not, they still have the skin in the game. Or at least
yeah,
they have their skin.
yeah, we have their skin. But yeah, I'm really
Right.
surprised.
We'd like the rest of them too, if
Yeah.
possible. Yeah. Well, this is great, and I'm so glad to see you guys here. And it's, I don't care if it's one or 100 or 1,000 people. I just enjoy sharing ideas and wisdom and a little humor as well, if possible. So,
All right. Well, let me read the what I've written up here, and then we'll go on from there, and hopefully a few people will show up while we get into the openings here. All right. So
your recording is running. You got it.
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Recording is going. Just tell me. Yeah, yep. Says recording. I got it right up there. All right. So we're good. All right. So welcome to our PMI CV virtual webinar presentation with Steve Taubman and his talk, Bulletproof Resistance. I'm your moderator, Brian Williams, VP of Programs at PMI Champlain Valley. First, I'd like to thank our chapter sponsors, Desai Management Consulting and the University of Vermont Continuing and Distance Education for making these webinars and other chapter activities possible, along with the entire chapter board of directors led by our current president, Scott Friedman, who is on the call today. Uh, Hopefully we'll have a bigger turnout, but please consider joining us for our next and hopefully last strictly online webinar next month, June 9th at 7 p.m. When we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Brown on the topic of conquering engagement, something that will be quite useful as people start going back to that hybrid uh, working model from this work at home working model. The PMI CV board is actively engaged in planning our calendar for the upcoming year as well. Watch the newsletter and the website for future announcements regarding our annual membership meeting. We're planning to take sale on the Ethan Allen come August, so starting to put that together. And then plans for a return to in-person dinner meetings starting in September. So that's the going plan right now. Housekeeping, everybody, I guess, except Sandy has her camera on right now. And this small of a crowd, I'm not even going to say stay on mute. I mean, it's not that big of a crowd at this point. Please raise your hand. We've already had someone, Sue used the, or no, Sandy used the chat functionality. Uh, yeah, I'm sorry. Raise your hand. I'm sorry, the Zoom virtual raise your hand. You can raise it on the screen too. I can see. That's good. I will monitor chat for questions during the presentation, but with this small of a crowd, it looks like it's just going to be a free for all at this point. All right, so with that, let's get into the presentation. So let me introduce today's session, Bulletproof Resilience, and our speaker, Dr. Stephen Taubman. Don't wait for your next crisis. Your people need these skills to maintain their composure and stay the course no matter what comes their way. You and your team need a plan for bouncing back when the chips are down. Bulletproof resistance, I'm sorry, I keep saying resistant, resilience, sorry, provides the skills, systems, and self-awareness necessary to react quickly, effectively, and with integrity in a crisis, to get back in the game more powerfully than before the crisis occurred. Today's presentation also includes an autographed copy of Steve's book, which now I would say there's about a 1 in 4 chance of people winning because I can't win the book. So we may do rock paper scissors online. I don't know, but it is actually autographed by Steve. So we do have one copy here, and I'll figure out a way to get that to you. We may have to meet for coffee at Crew like I did with Steve. That actually worked out pretty well. First handshake in 18 months or 15 months too. That was great. All right, so introduction. Our guest today has an eclectic and unusual background. After 14 years running one of the nation's top chiropractic clinics, he became a sought-after corporate entertainer. He went on to write a best-selling book called Unhypnosis with a series of other critically acclaimed personal growth programs. He now travels the globe sharing insight and wisdom about how to live an inspired life while entertaining groups with his mind-boggling hypnosis and mind-reading shows. To date, Dr. Steve has hypnotized over 30,000 people. His fans include sports figures, business leaders, and A-list movie stars. He's been seen on national television, has been featured in major magazines, shared the stage with top business speakers like Jack Canfield and the late Zig Ziglar. Here today to share his insights into the top characteristics of highly successful people, please welcome best-selling author, international speaker, physician, mindfulness coach, transformational hypnotist, and nice guy, Dr. Steve Taubman.
Woo!
Yeah.
Wow, that introduction made it sound like I can't hold a job. Man, I'll tell you what, that was well done. I've got to give you props, Brian, because you're the first person who got all the words right. I've heard people trip over eclectic and hypnotist and transformational, and I think
Well,
you know the whole thing.
that's my sales pitch today. I'm like the proud papa. This
Yeah,
is today's New York Times.
yeah.
Alex T. Williams, that's my son. He actually wrote the article that's in the New York Times today.
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
like
Well,
proud papa. So he got that from somewhere.
now you have even more reasons to celebrate today, and
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm right with you 100% because I'm thrilled to be here. This is great. I'm glad that we even have video on the people who are here. We had Sandy for a moment, and she's gone again. But and that's always my request for these things is, you know, I don't get paid for this, so my currency is your smile. So you know, so the only reason not to be on here is if you got like a really sour face, and if you know, I'll assume that if I'm not seeing you, that's because you're just, you know, you just got a sour face, and we'll all make fun of you. How's that sound? But I'm super excited. I was remembering a couple of jokes that popped into my mind for some reason. It took me a while to figure out why, but one of them was a thing I heard when I was newly here in Vermont. How many of you are transplants to Vermont? The whole top row.
From how long ago, though? I mean, like, I've
Well,
been here
that-
26 years,
Yeah,
but
Okay,
what's
so that's
what's
the
the
exact
de minimis,
answer
yeah.
here. So you say I've been here 26 years, so I'm a Vermonter. And what a Vermonter would say would be, well, listen,
2 generations.
if a cat crawled in the oven and had kittens, you don't call them biscuits. So for all intents and purposes, you're not a Vermonter. I'm not.
I know I'm not a Vermonter, but I'm a transplant from a while ago.
Yeah, well, same here. I've been here now for 38, 39 years almost.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I've started to feel like it's home, you know. I'm starting to feel like people think I belong here. It's the lovely thing. But they used to say this thing. They'd say, you know, there used to be more cows in Vermont than people, and now there's more New Yorkers in Vermont than people. Which I think the reason I thought of that was that I used to have this distinction, like there are people and then there are business people, right? I grew up in the arts, and then I became a chiropractor, and I was running a practice. So my work was really in the medical health field, and so I never really thought of myself quite as a business person, you know, working in a company and whatnot. And so for a long time after I wrote my first book and was offered the opportunity to speak on stages, I think I still had a little anxiety about being in front of business people because, you know, there's more business people in Vermont than people. And I needed to, you know, to get used to the fact that we're all pretty much the same. And, you know, maybe if you're a business person, you're thinking more about the business and maybe less about all the inner workings of your mind and the personal stuff. And yet that's the direction that I've gone in. And it's something I want to, you know, at least jump on a little bit today is what makes us tick, what's underneath. And, you know, really, who are you? You know, are you a person who is in this business, or am I a project manager, or am I a human being who happens to manage projects? And I think it's an important question. I think back to Susan Boyle. Remember Susan Boyle from American Idol? This sort of kind of disheveled, housewife in England, and she got up on stage in American Idol, and people were already kind of being a little snarky when she got up there because of how she looked. And then she opened her mouth and she sang so beautifully that it brought tears to everyone's eye. And I think about that. I think about what's inside of all of us, that when we take off our skin, when we shed our identity as a business person, what's really behind all that? Who are we at the deepest level? And how can we, bring that to the forefront, maybe not overtly, but somehow the essence of who we are, so that our work is more inspiring, and that we're more inspiring to others, and that we are more inspired, because as we inspire others, we become more inspired ourselves. So I love that concept of starting from where we are, which is not in business, but human beings who want to make the biggest impact we can. And so I want to talk about the psychology of success in your business, but beyond business. In many ways, it's the psychology of any business you're in, and it's also the psychology of relationships. What is it that's going to get you through? And if we have the kind of conversation I suspect we're going to have today, then you're going to leave with some tools and strategies that'll help you when the psychological side, when the underpinning of who you are threatens to get in the way of what you want to do. So we're not just human beings, we're also human. Well, we're not just human doings, but we're also human beings. And so that's the arena that I'm coming from as we talk about this stuff. And so you already heard a little bit about me. I've had the good fortune to share the stage with some remarkable people. I've written some best-selling books on motivation and perspective. And, I guess the one other thing that I would add to all that is that I wouldn't have done any of that if I wasn't so screwed up growing up. So I always like to highlight the fact that those who have become successful in these sort of personal development areas and professional development areas, whether it's Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, or me, some of those people might give you the illusion that nothing bothers them. All's good, I'm fine. And I think that's a disservice, because if you're like most human beings, things can tend to bother you. And when you look to these motivational speakers and these top people, and you see them looking like they've got it all together, it could sometimes be disheartening. Have any of you had that experience? You go to a motivational seminar and you feel less motivated than when you went there? There was a moment for me in my chiropractic career when I was a chiropractor, and I had been attending seminars to learn new skills in order to motivate myself and keep my mojo, because I was starting to feel like I didn't really want to do it anymore. It was a great profession. I just didn't somehow feel like it was what I wanted to do. And I was at a chiropractic convention, and there was a motivational speaker on stage. This was at the Inn at Essex back in 1995. And I'd been practicing at that point for just about 14 years. And he was motivating people. We're all super excited about what we do, and he's got his arms in the air and everybody's whooping and hollering. And, I wasn't excited. I wanted to be excited. I felt like I should be, but I wasn't. It wasn't grabbing me. And it was the moment at which I realized that it was time to, explore other avenues in life. And it was so obvious in that moment, because there had been other moments where I thought about it, but it was so obvious in that moment that I picked up a magazine, and I turned to the back, a chiropractic magazine, and I found a company that evaluates practices for sale. And this was before cell phones. And I got up and I walked out of the room, and I picked up a payphone and I called the company. I said, I'm selling my practice. And it was just like, somehow I knew that, that the clock had run out on what I was doing. And I'm so glad I did, because it gave me the opportunity to explore a whole new set of dimensions to who we are and what we do. So exciting stuff. So the broad strokes when it comes to this area of resilience and this area of leadership and success, which is what all of us, I think, here share. How many of you consider yourselves leaders? Yeah, we're all leaders, right? We're all leading in some way, in some capacity. Even if we don't have the title, we're hopefully still coming from a place of leadership, from a place, leading from the heart in a way that inspires others to do their best. So thank you. So the thing that we want to recognize is that in any business, like you guys are in the project management field primarily, or some peripheral associated field, that there are two primary branches that determine your success. Those are skill set and mindset. For you to be good at what you do, you've got to have a good skill set. I can't teach you how to be a project manager. I'm not one myself. I think I've got a project manager kind of a mind, and I have the kind of engineering, structuring things in my mind piece, but it's not what I do, and it's not a skill that I'm here to teach. But according to all the research that's been done in the area of success, it turns out that about 80% of our success falls into that other area, the area of mindset. And that's something to really ponder, because it's the area we spend the least amount of time on. We're sharpening our skills, we're trying to meet the demands of the moment. But the question that I would ask is, where do you stand with regard to your habits, your attitudes, and your emotional regulation? Habits, attitudes, and emotional regulation. Habits and attitudes are so important that Zig Ziglar helped Eric Swanson, who I worked with for the last couple of years, coin the term habitude. Your habitudes. It says your habits and your attitudes determine your aptitude and your altitude. So your habits and your attitudes. And so, what do those look like? And most importantly, what's your capacity for emotional regulation? How are you doing at keeping your mind clear and calm and peaceful and incisive and resourceful, especially when the what hits the fan? And I guess I should ask, just to make sure I'm talking to the right group of people here, that how many of you ever experienced stress? Yeah. And how many of you ever find that stress can become overwhelming, or at the very least, become an obstruction or obstacle to doing your best work? And have you ever noticed that stress doesn't even have to come from work? You can borrow stress from home and bring it to work. Or you could also borrow stress from work and bring it home. And so what we'll talk about today will be a series of skills and strategies, a technique compilation that will help you leave things where they belong. So you don't have to borrow your home stress and bring it to work. You don't have to borrow your work stress and bring it home. And a lot of that does come down to this area of emotional regulation. And it was funny, I wanted to bring this up also, Scott, Brian, when you were introducing me and you said, you kept saying resistance instead of resilience.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity to make a distinction, because I don't think a lot of people make that distinction between resistance and resilience. Everybody wants to bring out their best, but not everybody understands what being my best really means, or what resilience really means. So you tell most people to be resilient, all they do is they grit their teeth tighter. And that's their version of resilience. And it's equated with grit. And grit, Scott, it's good to have grit, right? It's not a bad thing to have a little stick-to-itiveness, a little bit of an ability to kind of fight through things. But the truly resilient person has a great advantage over the person who's merely operating based on mere persistence and grit. And it has to do with framing. How are they thinking about the experience they're having in the moment? What am I doing with this set of unusual circumstances that have presented themselves to me right now in this moment? Because if I'm walking down a path and I see a snake right in front of me, I might scream. My heart might start beating very, very quickly. Or I might try to tough it out and jump over the snake, but get bitten. But if I'm walking up to a snake and suddenly, in that moment, I suddenly realize, oh, that's not a snake, it's a stick. All the pain goes away. I don't have to have any grit. I don't have to have any stick-to-itiveness. I don't have to have any, I could handle the worst of it. All I have to do is have a better understanding of what actually is. And I think for many of us, our lack of resilience really comes down to a lack of an understanding of what really is. What are the real consequences of the experience you're having now? What are the real, what's the real cost of this? How easily can this thing be resolved? And where do I get the wisdom and the insight to resolve it? I was thinking about our emotional regulation. Well, let me do this. Let me further subdivide my ideas here about what happens under the heading of mindset. So we say there's skill set and there's mindset. Skill set we're not talking about at all. And then there's mindset, and under the heading of mindset, there's habits, attitudes, and emotional regulation, those three things. And if you were to subdivide that further, you'd say, well, under the area of habits, there are things that we can make habitual in our lives that will stave off the likelihood that things are going to get messy. Because if you're dealing with messiness and you're dealing with a lot of difficulty, you're feeling lots of stress, the first place to go is, well, what am I doing wrong? What can I do? What can I do in the external world around me to just dissipate the stress? And so when I was traveling around the country doing workshops, I always did a segment on time management. I always felt like time management was one of the important areas. Now, how many of you would say that you could use a little help in the area of time management? Okay, so Brian's raising his hand. The rest of you, not so much. So because you're managers, you're probably better at this than others, but let me share a little bit with you anyway, not necessarily because these are tools you're not aware of, but maybe that these are tools that you are not sharing with people you're working with to help them to be a little bit more precise and efficient and therefore less stressed. And then if they could take a few notches off the stress belt, then maybe we don't need to work as hard on the other side of the formula with our emotional regulation. So in the area of time management, we would teach a few things. First of all, is prioritizing. The Pareto principle is that 20% of your time is being spent doing what's getting you 80% of your results. And 80% of your time is being spent getting 20% of your results. That is a skew, and it's not a good thing. It's something you want to become aware of. What are the things that get me the most efficient? What's going to get me the biggest bang for the buck? That's a place you could ask everybody to look right now. And it's just a little bit of head work, a little spade work, maybe a little bit of writing. It doesn't take that long for somebody to figure out where their time is being spent and whether that time is being spent effectively, whether they might be better off delegating or maybe even throwing away a job or two. Those things could be powerful. The next thing is the eat the frog principle. How many of you are familiar with eat the frog? Brian Tracy wrote that. I just shared the stage with Brian in San Diego. It was the last stage I was on before I was called home. Brian Tracy, if you don't know him, is a remarkable teacher of sales and personal development. It was the #1 sales trainer in America and wrote the book Goals, literally wrote the book. And he wrote a book called Eat That Frog. And Eat That Frog is
different than the boiling the frog.
Yeah, it's different from boiling the frog. That's right. First you boil it, then you eat it. But boiling the frog is another interesting lesson, which is, you put the frog in the water and you turn it, heat up slowly, and the frog gets used to it and boils to death. That's all of us, right? So many of us are so stressed out, we don't even know that we're stressed out. We're so intense that we don't realize how intense we are. That's why the work that I do is so important in this whole realm, because we want to start getting a certain level of awareness of how hot the water is getting so we could jump out before we boil to death. But the eat the frog principle is a different principle. And it comes from a quote from Mark Twain. Mark Twain, he said, "Every morning when you wake up," what? No, that's what he sounded like. Nobody really knows, nobody ever recorded his voice, which is a terrible loss. There was a little video of Mark Twain, a little reel to reel, but it was silent. Mark Twain said, "Every morning when you wake up, eat a live frog, and nothing worse will happen for the rest of the day." And of course, the point he's making is when you prioritize, you're going to find there are certain things that need doing that are the most objectionable things you need to do. And what you're likely to do is put them off till the end of the day in the secret hope that you run out of time before you have to do them. And then lo and behold, you do, and then it gets put off and it gets put off, and it becomes the core of your procrastination process. And it doesn't really serve you. And in certain arenas, and particularly in terms of interpersonal relations, it can be very harmful. So what he's saying is take that biggest, ugliest thing you got to do and put it #1 on your priority list, #1 on your timesheet, if you will, which of course brings up time blocking. Are you all Is that something that you guys are all sort of tend to do, is block time? I probably don't have to say much about it because I know you're pretty good at that, and you probably use some programs and you've got things in nice colorful blocks. What I'll say about it is broaden your use of it to home as well, to where you might even block off time to do nothing, which is a wonderful thing to do. I've got about a 2-week block planned for that. So block off, make your time blocks colorful and clear, and use it as often as you can. And then if you've decided that I'm doing working on project A between 3 and 4 o'clock, then what do you do between 3 and 4 o'clock? Project A and nothing else. And this is where it becomes a problem for a lot of people. They may time block, but they don't necessarily follow what they wrote. Right? It's like the Jerry Seinfeld thing at the car rental where he says, you know how to take a reservation, you don't know how to keep the reservation. So we need to learn how to keep our time blocks sacrosanct. And one of the ways to do that, one of the most effective ways to do that, because one of the biggest time wasters are phone calls. Have you noticed? Because they're unexpected. Somebody calls and, well, you got to answer the phone when it rings. And, sometimes we get those blindsided phone calls, Aunt Mildred, I call it Aunt Mildred because my Aunt Mildred used to do that. You'd pick up the phone and say hello. And before you even, before she said anything else, she was already in the middle of a story. And then you'd be like trying to, you're looking at your watch, but at the same time, you're trying to be nice to Aunt Mildred, and it kind of stretches out. And the next thing you know, you've lost the sanctity of your time block. And it becomes really, really frustrating because you had something really good to do and you were being pretty efficient before the phone rang. And I don't know if you're familiar with the research on this, but do you know how, Scott, you probably know this, how long does it take to bring your focus back to full focus, full efficiency once it's been disrupted?
I think it's 15 to 20 minutes, something like that.
Exactly right, 15 to 20 minutes. So, that one little phone call, that one little quick response of a text, those things that break your flow have dire consequences. And so when you're in the process of becoming more efficient, managing your time more effectively, working that whole habit angle, what you got to do is schedule time for returning phone calls. And when was the last time you changed your answering machine message? Had somebody say, I don't know, what year is it? Right? We don't use our answering machine message to its fullest extent, but it's easy to fix, right? It's easy to change. I can change my message right now in the time it takes to say my next sentence. And you can do it every day. Hey, this is Jamie. I'm in the middle of a project right now, but I'll be done at 2 o'clock. I'm returning phone calls at 2 o'clock. I'll call you back between 2 and 3. Boom. Which people respect because they don't necessarily know they're going to get you, but now they know when they're going to get you. And then there's an interesting thing to consider around that, which is, okay, so 2 o'clock rolls around, it's my time to return phone calls, and Aunt Mildred was one of the people who called. Do I call her back? What do you think there, Sue?
I think you should call her back.
I agree with you. Okay. And when should I call her back, Scott?
When you have the time so that you can focus.
Okay. So here's what I would do.
Probably
I would
last.
call her back. Most people call her back last, which actually means hopefully never. We got to be honest. You see, intellectual honesty is a sign of high success in life. The people who tend to tell themselves they're going to do something secretly knowing they're not, tend not to get as far in life as the people who say, I know I'm a procrastinator. I know this is one of those things I'm going to probably procrastinate about. And so I better be proactive about how to respond to that. So how do you be proactive? You call it first, but you got to do it a certain way. So first of all, your answering machine message says, I'm unavailable right now, but I will be getting back to you between this time and that time. And then because of your integrity, which is always at stake, you got to do it, because if you don't do it, your integrity is off, and without integrity, nothing works. So now you've got this chunk of work. You've got X number of people to call back. If you divide it up and I've got maybe 5 minutes available for each person, and that's not hard and fast. You might have some people that need a little bit more time, but within a reasonable range of division. And then you call everybody back, and here's what you do. it's a process that I've discovered has helped lots and lots of people. I've used it a lot. And usually what we do is we call people back with trepidation. I hope they don't take up too much of my time. Right. And then we don't make any agreements about that. We just, we start doing that thing where you're going, yeah, sure, yeah. And then you're trying to do something else at the same time. So you're busy, like, you're talking to him, Mildred, but at the same time, you're like, oh, that's funny. Look what I'm doing. Anybody old enough to know what I was doing? Typewriter.
Typewriter. Yep.
Oh my goodness. What happens is we try to multitask. Multitasking does not work. All the research is in. It's 100% true. You can't multitask. You've got to be focused, especially with relationships, especially with people. So the other irony is that if you're talking to Aunt Mildred and you're multitasking, at some level she knows it. She feels it. She's not feeling it. She's getting her minimum daily requirement of your attention. And so what does she do? She talks more, not less. She's not taking a hint. She's never going to take a hint. Aunt Mildred will never take a hint. So skip the hints. And so here's how I handle those situations. And this is what I would teach your team as a way of being more efficient. You say, look, set up an answering machine message that says you're available to return calls at a certain time. Return the calls during that time. Know before you pick up the phone how much time you have to allocate to any one individual. And if it's an individual for whom there's a likelihood that they're going to need more of your time, then you've got to handle it in an appropriate way. So this is what I do. I do it this way every time. So Scott calls me up, and I know Scott just never shuts up, right? He's just like the chatterbox. So I call Scott back. I say, hey, Scott, I see you called me a little while ago. And as I said on my message, I'm returning calls right now. And I wanted to get back to you. I appreciate that you called. Listen, I've literally only got 3 minutes right now. Is that enough time for what you need? Now, he will then say, no, I actually need to talk to you a little bit more. Or he'll say, yeah, 3 minutes is good. I could bang it out really quick, right? Now, if he says, now 3 minutes is enough, I say, great, shoot. And he tells me what he wants to tell me. If he says, I need some more time, I say, awesome, let's use this 3 minutes to schedule the time you need. And then that becomes another time block. Now it's on our terms. Now we know how much time he needs. It's on my schedule. There's no mystery about it. The way that process works is number one is acknowledge. Number two is set a limit. And number three is ask the question, is that enough time? If you skip any of those steps, you run the risk of getting trodden on or seeming like a jerk.
So one thing, you're making an assumption that the people that reached out to you that need to talk to you are going to be available in that box that you say that you're available.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily an assumption. It's just I'm operating on the idea that I either will reach them or I won't reach them. And if I don't reach them, I'll leave them a message as well. And I'll say, here's another time I'll be available. Sorry, I missed you. I'll be available at 3 o'clock. Give me a shout then. If that doesn't work, fire me off an email and we'll get some time scheduled. Sorry, I couldn't get to you before. I always like being sort of apologetic and sort of thankful. People appreciate that. I mean, if you removed every other word from your vocabulary as a human being and all you said was, I'm sorry, thank you, I love you, like you'd make a lot of friends. Those are like foundational principles. And so if you follow those, it works well. It's been very, very good to me. So I'll leave that part of the conversation, the part where we talk about the habits, the things that you do to create a structure within which you live your life. So you're minimizing the likelihood of creating more drama and stress, right? So, well, before I leave that area, I will say that how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah, one thing I'd say, Steve, on a comment I'd have on that. I mean, what it is today is more text, especially in a remote world. It's not phone calls these days, at least for me, it's text. And so, yeah, I have done a lot of what you said. The one thing I wrote down, though, is the setting a limit. I haven't really done the set a limit, but I do, I'm involved in several different projects that are just pulling an inordinate amount of time. So I do acknowledge it, and I do set a time like, hey, 15 minutes, give me some time to finish up what I'm doing. I'll come talk to you. But the set a limit is new to me. say, is this a 5-minute conversation? Or is this going to be a 30-minute conversation? We do get to the point sometimes where, yeah, we schedule the meeting to say, okay, we need a half-hour block, but a lot of the conversations, we don't really set a limit.
Yeah, it makes a difference, and you'll enjoy it. It sort of empowers you, and it empowers them too, because I think there's something about, there's something pragmatic and powerful about clarity. Tony Robbins says clarity is power. So you're just creating clarity in the conversation. So yeah, play with it. Let me know how it works out for you. And then, the other things that I like to talk about are, we say discipline is freedom. The more disciplines you layer into your life, wake up every morning, make your bed. All right. Just do it. Do these things, brush your teeth, please. And various other things that we do. The more we create a kind of a structure of our day, the more freedom we have to operate effectively and smoothly. So I'm a big believer in that as well. And that kind of concludes the part of the conversation where I wanted to say that under the umbrella of mindset, there is, the habits and the attitudes and the emotional regulation. But when we talk about resilience, we're talking about emotional regulation and mastery, and we're talking about self-awareness. So here's a question for you. Have you ever had to pee, but you also had a lot of work to do, and you decided, I'm going to put aside the fact that I have to pee and I get to work? And after a little while, you kind of got into the flow of working, and you sort of forgot that you had to pee. So you're still working and you're doing what you have to do, but you're gradually, without realizing that it has to do with the fact that you have to pee, you're gradually getting more impatient and short-tempered, and just trying to get things done quickly. And there's just an anxiety level inside of you. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, I've got to pee. And then you go to the bathroom and you come out, and it's like you have a whole new world. It's like everything feels good again. You're living in a state of discomfort, but the discomfort is at a low enough level so as to not present itself as something you need to do. Do you know what I mean? Am I the only one who's had that experience? So this is how most of us live our lives. Most of us have to pee. Most of us are living with low-grade anxiety that's just low enough on our Richter scale that we're not addressing it, but it's having an impact on everything we do. And it primarily has an effect on your resilience, because our resilience really comes down to how masterfully and elegantly can I handle every challenge that comes along. And if I'm at a low-level anxiety, I'm not thinking about anxiety, I'm just thinking about this situation I'm facing, and I'm not facing it very well. So one of my quotes is, fix the mood before you fix the mess. Your life is filled with messes. In fact, you are professional mess fixers. And that's what you're dealing with day in and day out. Some of them are your messes, some of them are other people's messes, some of them are the messes you were paid to clean up, and some of them are messes that you've been forced to volunteer to clean up. And when you are in a state, a mood, an energy level that doesn't really promote the best resourcefulness, then that's what needs your attention first. And that's the crux of this conversation about resilience. How can you essentially have that psychic peak, let go of all the negative energy so that there's a strength and a structure to you? Because our ability to be what I call bulletproof, all the stuff that's coming at us, is directly proportional to our serenity. How serene, how peaceful are you in this moment? Peaceful people, they weave and dodge, and they somehow manage to make good decisions because their sense of humor hasn't been compromised. And so this is a discussion about wisdom, and wisdom is something we could all use more of. We're all knowledgeable, we're all smart, we all went to school, we're all masters at our craft. But one thing that nobody ever really taught us was wisdom. Wisdom is self-awareness and self-acceptance. It's perspective. How many different ways can I look at this situation? Is there a better way to look at this situation? You all know the story about the 5 blind men and the elephant. Brian knows that story. It's the story of five blind men are walking through a jungle, and they come across an elephant, and there's somebody else there with him. I said, "What's this?" He says, "It's an elephant." And so each of the blind men gets up against it to feel the elephant, to see what an elephant is. And one of them is up against the side of the elephant. He says, "Oh, an elephant is like a wall." Another one is touching the leg, and he says, "No, an elephant's more like a tree." Another one's holding the trunk. He says, "No, the elephant is like a rope." And then another one is like, feeling the little hairy part of the bottom of the tail. He says, "No, an elephant is like a broom." And then, of course, the elephant turns around and they all feel a different part. And suddenly they realize the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We're only seeing a small piece of what we need to see. And anytime you experience yourself as overwhelmed, frustrated, irritated, stressed out, chances are there is a perspective shift that would change that for you. And there are a few ways that can happen. So the first thing is to look at the model as a whole, the model of resilience. The model of resilience says that there are five steps that don't necessarily happen in order, but each one promotes a better use of the next one. So the 5 steps are, first of all, go to work happy, go to work with positive expectation, go to work saying to yourself, I want to live a happy life. I'm not coming in here to complain and make myself and everybody else around me miserable. I'm not going to work hoping something happens so that I could then be happy. In other words, be proactive about, to the best of your ability, creating a framework where your yardstick for success is how happy, how peaceful, how content am I? Because if you go in without having done that piece of work, it's called setting an intention. I'm setting the intention that today I'm bringing my best, and I'm going to, like my friend John Galemore, the singer, he says, "I'm going to die with a smile if it kills me." And it's funny, but it's also, it's true. It's just, I'm not going to like plaster on a fake smile, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to look at situations through a lens of possibility and humor and love and happiness. And that's where I start. I mean, I could start that way and end the day really badly if I'm not lucky, but at least it's a good place to start. And so I always say, step 1 is at least set the intention. Step 2 is some of what we just talked about a moment ago, which is what I call clean up your act. Clean up your act. And what that means is do a mental inventory. What am I doing that is inefficient, not managing my time properly, that's just plain old sloppy? I'm not making my bed. I'm getting up in the morning and I've got socks sticking out of the bottom of my pants leg. Just how impeccable am I being? Because impeccability, the ability, when I say impeccability, is just a kind of a stance, a gravitas, a strength, a clarity that everything else stands on. It's like having a nice clean canvas to paint your painting on. So set up that capacity for impeccability by looking for the things that you're doing that might just be causing undue, unnecessary stress. And of course, that's the time management piece and everything else we've talked about. And that is as far as most people go if they get that far. The rest of this is like my piece to contribute to you, so that as we leave here today, hopefully you'll feel that you got something that you didn't really think about before, and it'll help. When you're under stress, you might say, if there's a crisis, you might say, someday we'll look back at this and laugh. And I say, why wait? What if I could laugh now? What if I could, step out of this scene and find the humor in it and be peaceful? And so you've made a commitment, an intention to come from a positive place, and then you've tried to clean up your act. And now the third step is a step that most of us have never learned. It's what I've spent the last 30 years of my life learning and teaching and crafting and empowering people to do. And that is sharpen your focus. Make a priority of sharpening your focus. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of it, when it comes to focus, are like, you remember the old matchbook. You'll remember this, Brian, probably the old, things where it'd be like, are you a 90-pound weakling? Take the Charles Atlas class to become strong. When it comes to our focus, we are 90-pound weaklings. We have virtually no capacity to generate laser focus on one thing and keep our focus on that one thing. Now, you guys are probably significantly better at this than a lot of other people because of the kind of work you do and the fact that you were drawn to that kind of work. You're probably more precise. You're probably better at focus. You're probably able to keep your mind on a particular job without getting too loopy. But the fact that you go home stressed out just goes to prove that your focus is starting to leak out away from you, because otherwise you'd be focused on one thing and then you go home and you're focused on that, and this has no impact on that. So in the world of mindfulness, mindfulness starts with this idea of focus. It starts with the idea that for you to be mindful, for you to be self-aware, confident, peaceful, and happy, and okay with whatever's going on, you need to practice. You can't say, I really need to be more focused. Yeah, I'm going to do that one day. One of these days I'll start to focus. No, you won't. No, you won't. That's not how it works. It's like me saying, one of these days I'll be able to lift 500 pounds. No, I won't. I could say it every day of my life. I'll never do it. Right? Because the capacity to focus in the way I'm talking about is the direct result of practice. So what do I mean by practice? Well, first and foremost, I mean meditate. We know the research is remarkable now that people who meditate, they've got a thicker cerebral cortex. They develop more new cells in their hippocampus. They develop a whole set of new cells that go from their, or actually neuronal connections, from their prefrontal cortex to either the medial or lateral prefrontal cortex. And it selectively causes nerve channels to open up in the part of your brain that assesses things objectively and comes up with good ideas. That part of your brain develops a direct pathway to the problems you're experiencing. So all of a sudden, the things that used to puzzle you and mystify you and aggravate you, you're not having that reaction anymore, because now there's a part of your brain that's been activated, which is a problem-solving part that doesn't come from a place of aggravation. And so these are some of the things that we know neurologically that can be proven on an fMRI. But experientially, what happens is when you start carving out periods of time during the day to direct your focus to a particular narrow point, you will start to feel smarter, you'll start to feel happier, and you'll start to feel funnier. Like me, you may not actually be funnier, but you'll feel funnier. A lightness starts to come over you when you start doing this kind of thing. So all of my kind of elite clients, the people who are doing this work at the highest level, people who are like trying to win a game or whatever, they all meditate. They carve out a period of time to do this, because even though it's not necessarily fun to do while you're doing it, the benefits become obvious after you've done it. So that brings up the question, well, if, in the short period of time we have together, what could I tell you about meditating that would make you actually do it and make it easier for you to do? So can I spend a moment or two on that with you? Cool. All right. Meditation is one of those things that, of course, first and foremost has been shrouded in mystery because it comes from the East, and and it sounds like it's supposed to go along with all kinds of rituals and spiritual, mystical processes and things, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something very, very scientifically defensible and easy, and doesn't require any of that stuff. A good meditator doesn't have to wear special robes, burn incense, wear beads, chant mantras, or any of those things. All you need to do is to be able to choose to bring your attention into a particular point and keep bringing it back again and again. It's just like any other form of exercise. So what I would encourage you to do, and you'll see the value of this pretty quickly, is try something, because everybody knows that meditation ultimately has something to do with getting your mind quiet. And so people will say, I've got to quiet my mind. And then they'll try to quiet their mind. So Sue, let's try this together here. I say, okay, Sue, stop thinking. And as soon as a thought arises, raise your hand. That's about as long as anybody can go. That's about it. So if you think that you've got to stop thinking, you're in big trouble, because you can't stop thinking. You can't tell yourself to stop thinking and then stop thinking. It doesn't work. In fact, it'll probably make you think more. Like, don't think of yellow elephants. All I see are yellow elephants. It's the opposite of reality. So you don't do that. What you do instead is you choose, it's not to choose what not to do, but you choose what to do. Right? So what you choose to do is to direct your attention to a physical experience. Now, the way most people are taught to do this is to start with a physical experience that is reproducible, that's always there. And so it's usually the breath. It's usually your breath. And so what I would suggest you try is, and you can do it with your eyes closed or open. I don't care. If you close your eyes, I won't make fun of you. But if you bring your attention inward and breathe and keep your mouth closed and your eyes closed and just breathe in through your nose and back out again. And not to force a breath, but simply to notice air as it comes in and notice air as it goes back out again. Just be like a cat sitting at the mouse hole waiting for the mouse to come out. You just make sure you notice the in-breath, make sure you notice the out-breath. And then you'll notice very quickly that your thoughts will arise, your brain will start to activate itself. And either you're going to do the typical, I'm going to think about the past or the future. What am I having for dinner tonight? Or are you going to evaluate the present? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is stupid. I hope I'm doing it right. Those are all like evaluations of the present. So you're either in the past, the future, or just in a state of evaluating the present. And you might just notice which you are, So breathe in and out. Oh, there's a thought. And then you just say to yourself the word thinking. Bring your attention back to your breath. No foul, no judgment. The reality is that your brain is going to keep thinking on you and you're not going to be able to stop it anyway. So we use the metaphor, bring the puppy back to the paper. When you're training, house training a puppy, like I'm going to be getting my new puppy soon. You put the puppy where you want it to pee, and then he goes wandering off, and you pick him up and you bring him back, and he goes up somewhere else. That's your brain. It just goes off and you bring it back, and it goes off and you bring it back. And 15 minutes of that, a couple times a day, will change your life. Because all you're doing is you're sharpening your focus, you're increasing your concentration. And when you do it for a little while and you open your eyes back up again, you notice there's a shift in the energy inside of you. It's a very sweet experience. So that is a good first step as a meditator, is to simply take 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, close your eyes, close your mouth, breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your nose. Just be aware of the air coming in and out. If you can sense the feeling of the air on your nostrils, great. Or if you're just aware of it, aware of the breath in and out, in and out. Powerful, powerful experience. And it is a prerequisite to the next step I'm going to share with you. So before I do that, do you have any questions or comments about that? So again, nothing to think, nothing to believe, nothing to judge, just it's simply you directing your attention to a small area and observing your breath going in and out. And if you just start to put that into your life, what you'll find is it'll increase your energy, it'll increase your optimism. And when you notice that, send me a text, send me an email, let me know. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm actually noticing improvement in my functionality. I'm less reactive, which means I am more resilient. And then the last one that we'll talk about today, this is the fourth of the 5 steps. I'll tell you quickly, the 5th step has to do with teamwork. None of us is as smart as all of us. Right? You can't be your best self by yourself. Sometimes things are aggravating and you don't know what to do, and breathing your way through it isn't working. And you got to call somebody up and say, I'm going crazy. And you just need somebody to listen. So I call that assemble your lifeboats. We've got to assemble our lifeboats and create environments where we know there's always somebody there that I can turn to so that I'm not going it alone. So just to review, and then we'll go right back to the 4th step. We're saying step 1, choose to be happy. Step 2, clean up your act. Step 3, sharpen your focus. Step 5 is assemble your lifeboats. And now let's talk about step 4. This is my favorite topic. Let's see, when was the last time you were aggravated or irritated? Brian's like,
About 3 hours ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say almost exactly 3 hours ago.
Okay. Right. So, and would you say it's a relatively regular occurrence? Somebody's going to do something that's going to piss you off, aggravate you, irritate you, or some circumstance is going to arise, or your computer is going to fail you. right in the middle of a project, and you're going to go into obsessive compulsive mode and try to do something that can't be done without the computer, but you're going to try anyway because damn it, I said I was going to do it. So we're a problem waiting to happen because we have a very difficult time shutting off our brains and shutting off our reactions. And if I could leave you with anything today, it's going to be that for you to be resilient is for you to be non-reactive, and for you to be non-reactive is to learn a particular skill that nobody has ever taught you. And so I'm going to teach it to you today. And as I said, the prerequisite for this skill to work effectively is do the meditation, the breathing in and out, notice your nostrils and whatnot. Why? Because the thing I'm about to teach you has to do with you being able to apply focus to your physical experience. And your brain is going to want to go off in every other direction, because what happens when you're aggravated, you go off on a mental vacation. It's not a very happy vacation, but you're off and running. It's like, the next time I see them, I'm going to say that. And then, he shouldn't have done that. And what's the matter? And you're basically building a case against somebody, or you're saying, why me? But there's a lot of obviously unresourceful thinking going on when you're upset. So here's what neurology has taught us lately, and what the Buddha came up with back in 2,500 years ago that mirror each other. And it is this: you have a thought. The thought produces a neurochemical response in your body, which shows up as an energy that we call an emotion. If it sticks around long enough, it becomes a mood, right? You get in a mood. And then that particular mood, or that particular set of emotions that you're feeling, become the seed that you plant in order for a new set of thoughts to arise, which just happen to be the exact same thoughts. So you're in a vicious cycle. Something happens, you're aggravated. You feel the feeling of aggravated because you've just thought the thoughts about what you're upset about. It all happens in a split second. Well, now your nervous system cycles around and it says, well, now that I'm feeling this miserable feeling, I might as well have some thoughts that go along with it. So I guess I'm going to think more misery producing thoughts. And that's exactly how the nervous system works. And one other interesting monkey wrench in the works is the fact that we think we're actually doing something good. So you have something happens that bothers you. You have some thoughts about it. You feel the set of feelings. And then you start thinking the thoughts. And with the thoughts you start to think, you think are thoughts that are going to get you out of the problem. I'm going to solve this problem. And so when you're thinking about all the things you should have said, could have said, will say to end the fight, none of those things are of any use to you whatsoever. That's why my favorite quote is, don't believe everything you think. Because you're thinking thoughts that are unresourceful because they're born of an unresourceful mindset, an unresourceful mood, which again is why you fix the mood before you fix the mess. See how this is all tying together? Here's what you do instead. The simplest and yet the hardest thing in the world, which is you stop thinking. That's what breaks the cycle. Now, we've already discovered you can't stop thinking by stopping thinking. So that's a dilemma. Because let's face it, I mean, let's just put it on the table that if you were in fact an expert at inexplicably being able to stop your brain from thinking at a moment's notice, and something really irritating happened, and you were now feeling uncomfortable feelings in your body that we call stress or emotions, misery, suffering, and all that stuff was going on inside of you. And you were aware of the fact that those feelings were going to make you think more thoughts that you thought were resourceful that actually weren't. If you knew that, you would just say, I'm going to stop thinking. And what would happen would be all that misery that you were feeling inside of your body would eventually dissipate, because the misery is finite. That's one of the things that we never learn. The misery is finite, meaning that the only reason that you're holding on to negative energy is because you're continuing to manufacture more of it. It's like a fire. You sit in front of a beautiful fire, and if you sit there long enough, the fire goes out. But if you throw another log on it, it doesn't go out. And every thought is a log. Every thought is a log. So what I'm saying is that your only hope for inner peace is to do something that's impossible. Okay, see it. No, just kidding. So how do we make it possible? How do we literally interrupt the cycle of thought and emotion long enough for the emotion to bubble down to a low simmer, so that we can regain our wisdom, so that we can gain our humor, and we can gain our resilience, and then take that resilience and bring it to work with us, so that we, kind of parry all the stuff that used to make us miserable. How do we make ourselves happy? And the answer is actually quite simple. The answer is we get out of our head and into our body. You get out of your head and into your body. So remember I said, Sue, stop thinking, and you did it for all of like 3 seconds, and then you were thinking again. And you might think I've just got ADD, but no more or less than any of the rest of us, right? We just grab onto thoughts. The act of focusing that you were doing before is your lifeline, because the act of focusing means you are applying will to your attention, to your awareness. You're deciding where to put your awareness. You're deciding where to put your attention, right? As opposed to letting all the thoughts in your head decide for you where to put your attention. So the solution of getting out of your head and into your body is simply that as soon as you begin to experience aggravation, irritation, frustration, anguish, anxiety, any of those feelings, you follow a few steps. So I'm going to teach you these steps right now, and then you can kind of play with it and see how it works. It's kind of cool. It's very freeing, because you'll realize, wow, I'm not at the mercy of all these idiots I work with. How's that sound? So here's what you do. You say, wow, something just happened and I'm really upset. I'm in a fight, or my computer, I'm in a fight with my computer, or I'm in a fight with my spouse, or I'm in a fight with my coworker or my client or whatever. Something is amiss and I'm aggravated. And I know I'm not going to be very resourceful if I stay here and fight it out. So step one is remove yourself. Remove yourself from the battlefield. How do you do that? Elegantly, go to the bathroom. Hop in your car, right? Take a walk around the building. Whatever you need to do to just separate yourself from the irritant, right? Like if you've got a bad sunburn, the first thing you do is get out of the sun. So get out of the heat. So that's the first step, get out of the heat. Step two is replay briefly the cause of your misery. Replay it briefly in your mind. I can't believe Scott said that. He's such an idiot. I want to kill him. He's made my life a living hell. Okay, now I've kind of churned myself up, and I hate Scott, and that's about what most people do. And then they'll start thinking about Scott or what they could say to him, and that's where they go wrong. Here's what you do instead. As soon as you've got yourself worked into that fever of annoyance, turn your attention away from the thing that aggravated you. In this case, Scott. And turn your attention to the inner experience, the inner sensory experience that you're feeling right then. So if I'm really angry, anger is both a thought and a sensation. The thought is all the stuff I'm saying to myself about Scott. The sensation is what it feels like in my body. And I haven't separated them from each other yet. But the moment I say, okay, now I'm going to put Scott on the back burner. The way I do that, by the way, is this. Remember I said perspective is important, like the elephant and the 5 blind men? My perspective is this. I live this perspective every day. Everybody who aggravates me is my teacher. Everybody who aggravates me is doing me a great big favor, because I want to be free. And they're reminding me of the places where I'm not. So thank you, Scott, for being such a big fat jerk. I appreciate you for that. So the first thing I do is I turn my attention away from the triggering event. And I put my attention instead on the feeling, the sensations in my body. And when I say sensations, I'm talking about as physical as you can make it. So I don't just say, oh, I'm really angry inside. Instead, what I do is I say, I feel pressure in my chest. I feel heat in my face. I feel butterflies in my stomach. You really look at it the way a scientist would look at an experiment. You become the scientist watching the physical sensory experience that's going on inside of your body. And then you say to yourself, I wonder how long this feeling is going to last. And what you can do is find the epicenter of the feeling. Every feeling you've ever had, even if you consider it a psychological phenomenon or the result of a fight, every experience you've ever had is a sensory experience. It's neurons, sensory neurons playing out a dance on your body. And if you poke around, not physically poke, but mentally poke around and see if you can determine, when I'm really angry, where do I feel it? Do I feel it more in my stomach, or do I feel it more in my throat? Is it a hot feeling? Is it a pressure? Is it a throbbing? Is it a steady feeling? Is it, does it feel like a weight? What does it feel like? And I'll just close my eyes. And if I find my brain wanting to go back to the reason this all happened, Scott, I'm like, no, right now we're just observing sensation. So I observe the sensation. And then I try to get go as close to it as I can, which is the exact opposite of what most people do. What we mostly do is we run from our emotions. We run from our aggravation. And the way we run from it is by trying to fix it, which usually involves prolonging the agony. So instead, what you do is you go right for it. And here's what you're going to find. When I was, I don't know, gosh, maybe 25 years ago, early in the days of Epcot Center, and back down in Disney World. Have any of you been there? You been to Disney? Okay, yeah. So when you go to Disney, in the evenings, I'm pretty sure it was at Epcot, they had this water and light show. So you know what I mean? Yeah. So
Laser show.
yeah, it's like a laser show, and then they go from laser to like film imagery. And what happens is there's a giant fountain, and you're sitting in front of this giant fountain, and all of a sudden there's a spray of water that goes up like 100 feet, and it forms like a wall of water. And they start like putting lasers all over it and everything. It's really, really cool. And then when I was watching this thing, they started playing imagery and loud music from The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Remember that movie? It was Mickey Mouse. The movie's from like 1933 or something like that, or maybe a little later, but it's a very old movie. It's in color. It's
Fantasia.
Oh, what did I say? Sorcerers, but Sorcerers
Fantasia.
is a part of Fantasia. So it's a
Yep.
movie with Fantasia, right?
Yep.
So they're playing Fantasia, and they're playing this scene from The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is a segment of it, with loud music, and there are kids crying, right? It's very loud, it's very scary, and there's Mickey Mouse and the sorcerer and all these, like the wand, and it looks really violent, and it's intense. And I have this thought that this big, scary, loud, intense thing that seems like it's going to come down and kill me is actually nothing more than lights projected onto water. And if I were to walk towards it rather than run from it, what would happen would be I'd get closer and closer to it until that big image became just a bunch of colorful water droplets. And then I'd walk through the water, I'd come out the other side, problem solved, it would be over. And that's exactly what we do in our lives. So much of what causes our fear and our anguish and our misery are lights projected onto an ephemeral surface. It seems big, it seems scary, but it's really nothing. And until you learn that you can walk through it, you are forever the victim. And the moment you learn that you can walk through it, you are forever free, because you've got a new skill you never had before. So what I'm suggesting is the next time that you feel any kind of intense emotion, remove yourself from its cause, or its apparent cause, because that wasn't the cause anyway. It's just what your brain thought the cause was. Remove yourself from the cause and explore the sensation and move in more and more closely to it, so that you're looking at it in tiny little pieces. Like the old billboards, the old billboards were all made up of dots. little colored dots. If you get close enough, you can't even see what it is. It's just colored dots. And if you get close enough to your emotions, to the sensation of your emotions, it's just little dots. Literally, actually, neuroscience tells us that literally is what it is. It's essentially a conglomeration of subatomic particles. They come together, they form an intense area in your body, and then they dissipate. And so the light of your awareness, that's the light you're projecting onto the water. The light of your awareness begins to dissolve those particles, begins to disperse those particles. So it's a remarkable exercise to just, and it's a deep mindfulness practice that comes from a willingness and a practice of being able to pay attention long enough to discover this mind-altering, life-changing reality. I have the power to let it all wash off of me. And once I realize I have the power to let it all wash off of me, you smile more. You're not living in fear of the next Fantasia thing, because I'll just walk through that too. Yeah, I might get a little freaked out at first. Yeah, I might get, that becomes the measure of your success in life, is how quickly you come back to your senses and walk through the water. And it becomes a lovely thing to do. And once you've got the skill, then you start reframing all the aggravating experiences in your life as one more chance to do it. Another metaphor, I've got one more metaphor and one more story, and then I'll stop and answer questions. The one metaphor is those computer-generated dotted things where when you look at it, all you see is a bunch of colored dots, but if you stare at it long enough and get the right defocusing, and then all of a sudden it's like a three-dimensional image living inside of it. Have you ever, you know what I'm talking about? Have you all been successful at seeing an image in one of those?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes and sometimes not. It's part of magic eye. Thank you, Sandy. Sometimes it's, I'm sorry, Sandy, I'm not really including you in the conversation very much because I don't see your face, but I know you're here and I appreciate you. Yeah, it's that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's almost as this sort of transformational thing that happens when you look at it properly. And I'll tell you my last story about how this sort of, I got onto this reality. 17 years ago, I attended a 10-day silent meditation retreat. I did it again 2 weeks ago. So I did it 17 years ago and I did it again 2 weeks ago. It's not easy. 10 days of saying nothing, 10 days of sitting with your own stuff. For a lot of people, that's like their worst nightmare. And it's not pleasant, but it's also like turning on a light in a dirty room. You finally get to clean it. So you walk away feeling free and clean. I'm sitting in meditation 17 years ago. My foot cramps up. You ever get a foot cramp? It's excruciating, right? It's like, and you want to jump up and start screaming and start stretching it. And that doesn't work anyway, but it's what you want to do. And I'm sitting in a meditation hall with like 100 silent meditators, and I can't do anything. So I'm sitting there. And what I've been discovering in smaller ways and learning intellectually is that all things are inherently ephemeral. All things are inherently temporary, impermanent. So I thought to myself, well, I wonder if that applies to a cramp in my foot. So what if I were to just sit here and watch the cramp? What would happen? I know it's terrifying, isn't it? But what if I just sat here and my foot's doing this, right? So here's what happens. It gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse until it's kind of contorted and exceptionally painful. And it stays like that for maybe about 1 to 3 minutes. And then it starts to abate, and it gets better, and it gets better, and it gets better. And you feel no pain left whatsoever when it's over. And the moment I had that experience, it kind of changed something inside of me, because what I realized was that most of the pain that we endure isn't the pain itself, but it's a resistance to the pain. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this is terrible, what's going to happen? The bone's going to rip off my muscle. It's all that anguish we're causing ourselves. But when you sit calmly and just watch pain and then watch it work its way through you until it's gone, again, that's a superpower. It'll make you better at what you do. It'll make you more patient. It'll make you more hopeful. It'll make you more lighthearted. And to me, bringing this all back around from the very beginning of our conversation is, you're not a project manager, you're a human being who does project management or whatever it is that you do. And you're a person with your own inner genius and your own challenges and your own inner beauty and and the ability and the inborn capacity to live a happy life. And to discover that in living a happy life, lo and behold, you're actually more productive because happiness creates success. Success doesn't create happiness. And that is the name of the game. So that was a big long sentence I just said for an hour and 20 minutes. Any comments, any questions, any rags, any bones, any bottles? Want to jump off and go watch the sunset?
I have a question. It may not quite be exactly related. So what have you stopped doing over time that at the time that you were doing it, you thought, oh, this is a good thing to do, or this is expected me to do, or I should really do this. And then you decided, yeah, maybe I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, that's
And it ended up better for it.
Yeah, that's like the greatest question ever. I'm going to have to make a note of that. I want to make sure that I answer that before it gets asked next time. It's a great question because it really is. Everything I'm talking about here is like meant to be. My book's Buddha in the Trenches because it's what's going on in the trenches that matters, right? It's not just that, oh, I've got peace and beauty while I'm sitting here meditating. Sometimes you don't get that at all. But when you go out in the world, you could have some peace and beauty if you do the work. And so what do you notice? Well, what I notice in doing this kind of work is, for one thing, I never fight with anybody. If I do, it lasts like 5 minutes, because as soon as I see that I'm going down that road, I realize it's like, hey, I'm not really being resourceful right now. Give me a minute. And I just go and I percolate it out. I basically metabolize the aggravation until it's gone. So I never fight, or virtually never fight. I never worry, like, oh my God, what if something happens? Because as soon as I hear a worry arise in my conscious mind, it's like, that's just my cortex trying to be creative and proactive. My cortex doesn't know shit. It really doesn't. It thinks it's got all the answers, and it thinks it's going to be able to create this, horrifying image that I then have to like try to fix. When in fact, I'm probably not moving anywhere near that horrifying image, but I know from doing this work that my brain, like everybody else's brain, is apt to catastrophize. It's a piece of how we're built. And so the not believing everything you think comes up. Oh, this is an unresourceful thought. I don't have to be thinking this thought right now. And so I interrupt it. Another thing I don't do, sometimes I've done it, but I almost never do it anymore. How many of you have ever like gotten really aggravated with somebody and written them an email?
Not lately, because I've learned better.
Yeah, I learned better as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and learn to like type it and then
get rid of it, right?
file it away and
Yep.
go back to it. And
Yeah, well, I was a slow learner, but this stuff definitely taught me that one in spades, because the reality that you're living while you're writing that email is not the reality you want to continue living with yourself or with that other person. So again, I agree with you, Sue. I want to write it because it's just self-expression, but I want to write it and I want to like destroy it after I've written it. And that's a really useful thing. Another thing that I don't do very much. Now, this was already part of my existence because I was a chiropractor and I was a big believer in holistic health and not using drugs to mask a symptom. But even more so now, I'm very, very unlikely to take any kind of a pain medication if I'm in pain. Because what I've discovered is, well, first of all, those meds almost always have side effects. I had a bad toothache like 2 days before I went on this 10-day retreat. I went to the dentist for like an emergency thing and they took x-rays and there was nothing, there was no root canal that was needed. So I went on this retreat with a throbbing toothache. It was so bad that the whole side of my jaw was in pain and my neck was in pain. It was really horrible. And I decided, okay, I'll bring some naproxen with me. And I took some naproxen the first couple nights, and all it did was give me this horrible stomach ache, because naproxen is kind of bad on your stomach. It's very uncomfortable. So instead, after 2 nights of that, I decided I don't like the feeling of the naproxen, and I also don't like the toothache. Those are the two things I'm clear on. So I decided to be done with the toothache. So I'm not going to take the naproxen if I'm done with the toothache. So what I did was almost identical to the technique I just taught you. So what I did was I sat there and I sort of observed the pain, and then I kind of went into the pain. Okay, see how deep into this you can go. Like, where's the worst spot? And I just adopted this, like an equanimous, meaning having equanimity, having non-judgmental awareness. Oh, okay, I really feel it over there, and it's throbbing a little bit over here. And somehow I was able to go into that part of my brain that just watches things without judging them. Okay, and I wonder how long that'll last. And somehow just the observing of the pain. About an hour later, I was out of pain, and I found out after the fact that I have a tooth that's cracked in 3 places. This tooth is definitely in need of help, and it's getting the help in another 5 days. But I've been pain-free for the last 2 weeks, and it was doing that. So that's one of the other things I'm better about. And I think I'm also, I guess the last one that comes to mind, and you may have something else you were thinking of that I'm not addressing, but another one that comes to mind for me is I think I'm a better leader, a better manager with people, because like that whole I've got to pee, like low level anxiety that that makes us have to jump in and fix something or jump in and correct somebody. If you don't feel that feeling, then you don't have to jump in. And so there's this kind of an attentiveness that's not accompanied by a need to fix something. And part of that I learned from meditation, and part of that I learned from having from my dog Woody, because I realized from Woody that curiosity is more important than control. Be curious. Ask the questions. Don't try to control the situation, because you're probably not going to be very good at it. And if you're curious, you might get answers that lead to even better solutions. Does that kind of hit any of the things you're wondering? What's that?
I was going to ask a question, but it's not nearly as good as Scott's question. But so while you were talking, I don't know if you noticed, but I was dealing with a mosquito, and it's the first mosquito of the season. And it got me thinking,
welcome him for me. Tell him I said hi.
There's got to be a metaphor for how do you deal with, I mean, like, so some of the things that you've been talking about, like, yes, you can just like kind of like either, confront it, deal with it, whatever, focus on something else. But mosquitoes are one of those things that, like, if you don't take some action, it's just gonna, like, you're gonna end up with bites all over the place, right? So
that's at least as good a question as Scott's question. I want you to know that's a great question, because there are a lot of mosquitoes in our lives. Some of them are insects and some of them are human. And some of them, you eventually feel like, if I don't swat this one, I'm going to suffer greatly for it.
Right.
And mosquitoes are, I believe mosquitoes are like the graduate course in mindfulness. And that's why they're here on the planet, is to, like, annoy us beyond belief and see what we do with them. So I'll tell you that I haven't intentionally swatted a mosquito in 10 years. And I get very few mosquito bites. Now, my theory about that is it's not a very metaphysical theory. It's more of a practical physical theory, which is, I remember walking with my father in the jungle in Puerto Rico, and there were mosquitoes swarming us, and my father's going like this, and he was like cursing at them and everything, and he was getting bitten everywhere, right? And I was just like walking right through, and it was like, go to him. He's fine. He's delicious, because he's sweating up a storm and he's making all kinds of movement. It turns out that mosquitoes are attracted to the smell of sweat, to heat and movement. So if you just keep your cool, you're not as attractive to the mosquito. And they tend to, like, now you'll still get bit from time to time. But what I usually do is I watch them. I'm like, and I'll say, probably don't want to land on me, and I just sort of like play this game like as if we're having a conversation. And then eventually one of them might land on me. I'll watch him for a minute. And if it looks like he's really getting ready to sink his teeth in, I'll blow him off. And if he comes back again, I'll flick him off. And I always have this thing in my head about, you come a third time, I'm going to kill you. But usually I don't. Usually I kind of let it go with that. And I've even sometimes let them bite me, and once they're not the same one's not coming back, and there's an endless supply of them. So swatting a mosquito is always an invitation to 25 other mosquitoes to come along. So it's like it's a no-win situation. So since it's a no-win situation, I try to treat it as such, and I try to have as much equanimity as I can around the mosquito. And it's sort of the same with other people. I mean, there are people I will intentionally try to avoid, right? I call it appropriate distance. In my first book on hypnosis, I say there's something that I call appropriate distance, which is essentially saying that if I want to like live my life in a state of love and acceptance of all beings, some of those beings are going to have to be a little further away from me than other beings, right? It's like I can, I might invite Sue over and we're hanging out here, we're having a lovely time, and it's beautiful, and you could stay for 3 days and we're just getting along fine, and I could send out all kinds of love and appreciation to you. But now my mother's no longer alive, but if my mother had come over for 3 days in a row, it wouldn't have gone that well for 3 days. I wouldn't have been able to extend that much loving compassion for 3 days in her presence. So, having her on Long Island was fine. I could go down and visit her for 1 day. And, it's appropriate. Like, what's the distance you need to put between you and others so that from that distance, you're able to send nothing but positive, loving energy, right? And if you're doing your work, if you're doing your due diligence, all the meditating and the observing and whatnot, then those distances do have a tendency to shrink. The people who used to aggravate you from here are now aggravating you from here. You are able to get closer and have more leeway to appreciate things that used to aggravate you, because things just don't aggravate you as much. But there are still things that always aggravate you, unless you're the Buddha. You're like the Dalai Lama or something, and you've transcended all aggravation. I'm not there, but my life is definitely better than it was without the work. Yeah, good question. Great question. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments?
No, this has been really good. We're actually a little bit over time. So
Great.
appreciate it. It's a lot of good stuff here. I mean, what I'd take away personally is for my younger son, I'd see where a lot of this he could benefit from. So it's like it's definitely giving me some thoughts to work with him as well, because a lot of what you talked about, he gets trapped into some of those negative cycles.
It's harder for kids now because there are too many other ways that they can distract themselves.
Yeah.
So they never learn the discipline of focus. And then they're also tied to the like culture. I've got to get likes on Facebook. The external validation and everything is very.
Well, what I found interesting though is that negative cycle of reinforcement of that, and that's something a little bit different that I hadn't really appreciated. That breaking that cycle of that negative reinforcement is a big deal when you're with your thoughts, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Is like when you say somebody's got, somebody's an alcoholic, or somebody's a drug addict, or somebody's a sex addict, or whatever it is, what they're actually addicted to is the sensations in their body. They're addicted to a feeling. Yeah. And so if you can master feeling, then you can master any addiction. Right now, depending on how big an addiction it is and how well you're doing the work is going to determine how successful you are with that addiction. But that's in theory how it works. First, break your addiction to thought and feeling.
Yeah, good point.
Better. All right. Well, this has been a delight. Let me just invite you guys, if any of you have any questions or comments, or you want to learn more about working with me in some other capacity, coaching or whatever, teaching to meditate, whatever you want, just fire me off an email, steve@stevetaubman.com. My website is stevetaubman.com. I've got other websites too, but those are probably good places to start. And I guess you're raffling off that copy of my book, but for everybody, you're all welcome to go to bestofsteve.com, and sign up, and you'll get a free digital download of the first chapter of that book. So
Brian, since I'm an officer, remove me, so make it a 1 in 3 chance.
1 in 3 chance. Well, that's what I was going to say. I wrote down a number. So for the 3 who are not officers of the club, put a number in the chat, since I have one person not on camera. Put a number in the chat and we'll see who's closest to it. So a number between 1 and 20, sorry.
Number between 1 and 20.
And the winner is Sandy. Number is 13.
13. Okay.
All right. So Sandy is the winner.
Congratulations, Sandy. Well, that's good. That's great. You'll probably pick that up from Brian at the at Crew Coffee at the end of Church Street.
Yeah. Make sure you get what was that? The one that I had with the MCT oil and all that was kind of strange, but yeah,
Yeah,
they have some interesting things there.
The cappuccino is pretty good, so
The
check that out.
cappuccino was good. Okay. So yeah, Sandy, I'll get in touch with you however we want to get that book out there. And so yeah, so to end the recording here, on behalf of PMICV, I'd like to thank Steve for his presentation today. Join us in a few weeks, June 9th. Hopefully we'll have a few more people here, 7 p.m. for our final presentation of the 2021 series, Conquering Engagement with Dr. Stephen Brown. So have a good evening and thank you. See the hand claps. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. See you guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.